In my time doing work for different European-based studios, I've noticed that European studios really have an affinity for Neumann microphones and would generally prefer it if you are going to work remotely, that your talent has a Neumann microphone. So for example, like this one here. So this you can't see very well, but it's a Neumann TLM103, and that's basically an industry standard microphone at this point. It's been industry standard basically since it came out. I think it came out in 1997, and it's been one of the gold standards for studios all over the world. Now, typically a lot of studios will use a Neumann U87, but this is kind of in the same ballpark. And, if it's not a Neumann U87, it's a Neumann TLM103, and a lot of studios will have both because they don't sound too different. Now, why this affinity for Neumann? Is it because Neumann microphones sound better than anything else by far and nothing else comes close? No, because there are many manufacturers like Austrian Audio or Soyuz, as well as others, AKG, rest in peace. And they all produce great microphones. And, you can even do great work with cheaper microphones, like, for example, the Rode NT1A. Only issue is, all of these microphones have different tones which are unfamiliar to studios. These studios are used to working with Neumann microphones. Consider this. Before the pandemic, all of these audio engineers that work in studios, they were working exclusively in person. And they worked with talent that physically entered the studio. So they all use the same microphone and the same room. This means absolute consistency. Now, many of them work with remote voice actors. That means they no longer have the same control over the voice actor's setup, which means all of them have different rooms, and all of them will naturally be slightly differently positioned because they don't have that same amount of control for that. All of these variables have been added because of remote work. Now, do we really want to add another variable? Now, I'm going to use my other microphone as an example, which is my Sennheiser MKH416. I'm going to switch on it so you can hear. This is the 416. Now, it's a good sounding microphone. This is not the conversation. It's not a conversation about quality, but it sounds different. So maybe the microphone handles EQ differently. Maybe it sounds unusual after compression. Maybe it doesn't cut through the audio bed in a way that the audio engineer is familiar with. Now, obviously, it's a bit ironic me using a 416 because it's familiar in the US and the UK, but in mainland Europe, they don't use this. They only use it specifically for some ADR. And even then, a lot of them will still use a Neumann U87, for better or worse. All this considered, you have your workflow. Now you've had this variable added, which is a different room, different position, different talent, different setup. Do we really want another variable in this production? If the voice talent has a microphone that the audio engineer is familiar with, it's peace of mind right there, because you don't need all these different variables. I actually specifically remember I was talking to a producer that I was working with in person. I said, look, I have a home studio, so if we need any extra things or a revision, I can actually do this from home. And it looked like he was ready to say no. And then I said, I have a Neumann TLM103, and then there was an immediate sort of, he looked, oh, okay, so yeah, we can do revisions. There was no regard for the studio. There was no regard for the room. It was just, oh, you have a Neumann microphone. Okay, so that means you can work remotely. You see, had I said I have an Austrian Audio OC818, wonderful microphone. I really like how that microphone sounds. I wouldn't have got, it wouldn't have worked. And unfortunately, that is the case, I would say, particularly in Europe, where there is this prejudice against non-Neumann microphones, but there is a genuinely good reason for that. In reality, I'll switch back to the TLM103. In reality, Neumann microphones, they're a bit like Pelican cases. Look, there are plenty of other brands that sell heavy-duty cases. But which brand has an unparalleled reputation for quality and reliability? So in that case, when we're talking about high-stakes environments, the answer becomes pretty clear, and all I can say is it sucks to be the other brands.